it. The amendment is agreed to. The gentleman from Illinois.
I demand a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Wyoming will be postponed. It is now in order to consider amendment number 58, printed in Part B of House Report 118-261. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Wyoming seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 58, printed in Part B of House Report number 118-261, offered by Ms. Hageman of Wyoming.
Pursuant to House Resolution 838, the gentlewoman from Wyoming, Ms. Hageman, and a member opposed each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Wyoming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in favor of my amendment number 58, which would prohibit the Department of Transportation from funding remote work agreements. The DOT defines its telework agreements where an employee performs work away from the typical office location and is not expected to report to the agency official worksite on a frequent, regular, or recurring basis. Mr. Chairman, as I have stood in this chamber and said before on numerous occasions, it is time for our federal government employees to return to work. Under the panic related to COVID-19, we watched as our federal agency building occupancy dwindled to almost nothing. What was the consequence? A substantial reduction in the timely provision of federal services to the citizens of this country. It should not come as a surprise to anyone, but when our federal employees don't show up for work, the work of the federal government doesn't get done. Now, some may say that is okay, but what it means in practice is that our tax refunds are not timely processed, our passport office effectively shuts down, creating enormous backlogs for this important service, and our veterans suffer. I have now filed several of these Let's Make Our Government Employees Return to Work amendments to other appropriations bills. This is a priority of the Republican members of the 118th Congress and a priority of mine. I know how hard our miners, farmers, ranchers, waitresses, nurses, construction contractors, home builders, grocery store clerks, and others in the private sector work. They didn't have the luxury of working from home, COVID or no COVID. They have powered our economy over the last couple of years, and we owe them a debt of gratitude. We also should have enough respect for them that we can demand that the people who earn a paycheck because of their tax dollars actually show up for work. I urge my colleagues to support my amendment, and with that I reserve.
Reserves. For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Mr. Chair, I claim time in opposition.
The gentleman is recognized.
Again, this is a very similar amendment to what has been considered before, and those agreements addressed in this amendment, where they exist, have been negotiated by OMB, labor unions, and management, and they've been in place under Republican and Democratic administrations. Again, this kind of sweeping prohibition, which fails to consider or address circumstances under which remote work arrangements may be beneficial to the taxpayer or a necessary accommodation for an employee, is not a serious approach to policymaking. I urge my colleagues to vote no, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The gentlewoman from Wyoming is recognized.
In pursuing the policy of requiring our federal employees to work in our federal offices, I have always been cognizant of the outlier situations whereby someone will need to work remotely. I'm not opposed to such flexibility, although that flexibility has now become the rule. I have left untouched the ad hoc telework programs for these various agencies because we never know when an emergency or unexpected situation will arise. Such an unexpected situation, however, should not become the norm, and our employees should be required to report to work. We still have not yet assessed the damage the federal government's remote work policy has had on constituent services, congressional oversight, and on federal waste in terms of the unused office buildings and agency officials unaccounted for because they are not being monitored in their official work sites. Even the GAO admits there is not enough information to assess the long-term impacts of remote work policies, including on whether it promotes a productive work environment. Mr. Chairman, the policy of this Republican majority has consistently been that COVID is over and federal workers must come to work, and this amendment aims to deliver on that promise. Unelected agency officials already believe they are unaccountable to Congress and the American people. Remote work further undermines our ability to oversee their activities and to promote providing the very best services that the federal government can provide to our citizens. I urge all my colleagues to support this amendment, and with that I yield back.
The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Wyoming. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the